Shabbat Shalom, just continuing what we started speaking about the past few days with regards to boilers. A very common question is, what is the status of using hot water from an electric boiler if you live in an apartment building? People very commonly think that if they live in an apartment building, especially if a majority of the tenants of the building are goyim, so then it should be mutar. Why? Because most of the hot water, even if the cold water is coming in, but it must be coming from the non-Jewish usage and not from mine. And that idea comes from a misconception about the boiler systems in apartment buildings. Baruch Hashem, I was able to do a lot of research. People sometimes think that if you live in an apartment building, that there's one huge boiler for the entire building, and then every time you turn on the water, right? If I'm a minority Jewish tenant, so maybe my turning on the water is so insignificant that it's not going to let hot water in. That's a mistake. Why? Because there's not one huge water boiler for the building. There are several. Every few apartments, not even every floor has its own, but every few apartments share a boiler. The same thing in a hotel, same idea. Therefore, the idea that your hot water usage will not trigger new cold water coming in is not necessarily the truth. It's very possible, depending on the amount of hot water that you use, it will trigger the new cold water coming in, and therefore, depending on what you hold like, whether you hold like Maran Zechron Bracha Yabiya Omer, that it's asur be'echlet, then the same isur should carry over to apartment buildings. If you hold like Maran Zechron Bracha later in Chazon Ovadia Shabbat Chelik Dalet, where he says that it's tov leachmir in apartment buildings as well, but it's not isur gamur like he said in his earlier years. It is tov leachmir. Therefore, la halacha, the universal halacha of we don't use hot water from boilers on Shabbat carries over very much to apartment buildings as well, regardless of whether or not a majority of the tenants are Jewish or non-Jewish. That is the halacha. B'ezrat Hashem this evening, Mincha is at 4:40, followed by Kabbalat Shabbat and Arvit. Shacharit on Sunday morning will still be chasing the nets. 5 to 7 is Hodu B'ezrat Hashem. Shabbat Shalom.